Okay, so we are back once again. We are back to our usual discussion session. Anup is here with me. Hi, Anup, welcome here.
Hello, Siraz.
So before we dive into the book from last week, me and Anup were having just a quick discussion previously, and uh, it marks almost 21st week of us trying to do this thing. So it means we have finished 21 books. And how do you feel, Anup? How have you found this
Uh,
exercise to be?
it's really good. I'm also noticing that I am reading a lot of things parallelly.
Hmm.
So in some weeks I actually finish like two or three books a week.
Wow.
Uh, some for courses, some other books for politics,
Hmm.
economics, and stuff like that. Right.
Hmm.
So currently I'm reading like two books. One is like a German self-help book, which is
Hmm.
quite different than English self-help book, because it's like really factual based, and
Hmm.
another one is like an economics book, um, and yeah, it's actually going really good. I actually started to see that I'm reading much more faster than before, like
Hmm.
for before 3 or 4 months, right?
Hmm.
So that's really good. How's it with you?
For me, I'm still struggling with the book. One book a week is quite enough for me, to be honest. The problem for me is, yeah, oftentimes it's hard for me to sit down and concentrate. And if it's not for you, then I would probably have stopped in week number 3 or 4, to be honest. But I feel like I'm trudging through the way. I'm not relishing like how you are doing, but it's just a slow
Mhm.
process for me that I'm trying to keep up with you and then try to finish these books. And for me, I think right now, at first, it was about trying to keep it short so that we can keep the rhythm going. And for me, it's still the same phase that we keep the rhythm going, but it's
Mhm.
much more
Mhm.
easier for me to ride on the waves of enthusiasm that you create than to just be the source of enthusiasm. And yeah, I cannot
Mhm. Mhm.
thank you enough. And I think this is also a really good message for anybody who's listening to us. There are, I think, average 20 people who listen to us. I don't know how long
Mhm.
they listen, but I think they should also jump into the books that we are reading, and not just for the books we are reading, which I just Google a book that on the themes that are interesting to me and then recommend, but rather
Mhm.
also, yeah, to establish the habit of reading regularly.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. So with all this forethought behind us, let's dive into the book. And this was a very, very interesting book. I admittedly I have not read so much of horror, and
Mhm.
reading horror. I have read books, quote unquote, who are said to be horror books, but
Mhm.
they have not really done so for me because uh, other than the atmosphere of the writing, there's not so much that can uh, incite fright inside of me. So I'm more
Mhm.
into, I get afraid watching horror movies with the sound effects and everything,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
reading stuffs, yeah, yeah, I feel the emotions of the writer, but they don't scare me. But this book had something about it, the amount of suspense, the amount of build up, and how the story progresses is
Mhm.
really fascinating to me. So maybe we can go with the usual Anup synopsis.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I will do a good faith if I do that to this book, But let us go through it. First of all, this book was actually really awesome. I was captivated until the end of the book. It was like really interesting until the last sentence of the book, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know if there was a peak or low in this book because I felt yeah, I really enjoyed like reading it. I finished it in 2 days actually,
Okay.
because it was a short book, right?
Mhm.
First of all, and second of all, yeah, the story was quite interesting. So it goes like this. In a village or in a city called Arkham, in Massachusetts, I think, a meteor lands, right? Um, and then that meteor has like weird properties, right? And then scientists come and start investigating it, and the meteorite grows smaller and smaller as time passes, right? It also kind of releases some kind of gas, which has luminous color, and slow by slow, the environment, like around this meteorite, they start changing. First of all, the fruit they or the plants they go extraordinarily large, but they are bad and they start decaying. I think, right, something like that. And later on, it also affects the people living in that area, right? So we um, are told about this one family which one by one starts dying, right?
Mm,
First they start getting mad, like, and then later on they pass away, right? And then people investigate this thing, and yeah, I think I'll leave it by that. People should read the book,
yeah, to be honest, I think the plot is a typical horror plot, right?
Mm, mm,
Things
mm,
extraterrestrial happens to a land,
mm,
and then the family whom the land belongs to start going crazy one by one, and then start dying by the end of the story, and that's basically what it is. But I would say the journey of the discovery is something that's more fascinating, and
mm, mm, mm,
yeah, how the writer has portrayed the themes in the story. Uh, I would say this book is probably one of those few books which has no, at least from my point of view, no philosophical discussions to be made, right? It's
mm. Yeah.
entertainment through and
Mm,
through. I would imagine
mm.
somebody in 1800s. I do you know when this book was written? When is H.P. Lovecraft from?
I think around 19th century.
Yeah, so in the 19th century, this is probably their episode of Game of Thrones that they discuss about, right? People read these books and then they sit in the coffee house and discuss about what they read.
Mm, mm,
But
mm.
yeah, from the storytelling point of view, it was really fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually watched some. I read something about this books, and
Mm,
there was one thing that was I think a theme of this book. That we human beings we are actually quite small being in comparison to the vast universe, right? And
mm,
I mean, like we are not as strong as the other species, right? Like we are like
mm,
really fragile, right? And I
mm,
think like this book also kind of shows that,
mm,
right?
mm. Yeah, and something that I felt while reading this book is the horses are a very abused species in human culture, right? The horses are they are put down for being too weak. They are put down for being too strong, right? They're put down for being crazy. They're put down for being lazy. So
Yeah.
being a horse is, especially a domesticated horse, is a very difficult thing to be in.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, there's abnormally large number of horse deaths in this book. So if you are turned off by this book, then I would suggest the horse death is going to be something.
Mm, mm.
Uh, have you ever read other horror books, or is this your first time?
I mean, I read a lot of crime books. I don't know if you can categorize that to
No,
horror
no,
books,
I
right?
don't think we can.
Yeah, it goes to similar themes. There are some books like with some um, metaphysical stuffs happening
Mm,
around that book, right? But still, that didn't felt like horror, but
mm,
like fantasy book, right? So this was definitely different, I think.
yeah, I have once read one called No Longer Human, right? It
Mm,
is not
mm,
necessarily a horror book. It's written by a Japanese writer, and basically it's about
mm,
a guy who's a psychopath, and he's discovering life as a psychopath.
mm,
And but it has elements of horror in it, that the interactions the guy has, the lengths the guy is willing to go for stuffs
mm, mm.
is
Yeah,
quite horrific in the nature.
yeah,
Uh, but that's how I felt about the horror genre. It,
mm,
to be honest, it's not my favorite genre. We know from past I'm not into horror movies as well, but
yeah, I know.
uh, I always enjoyed listening to them. Right?
Mm, mm,
Still remember when I was young, we used to have a
mm,
neighbor of two brothers. Right? They were like,
mm,
I think, 5 to 7 years older than me, and
mm,
then they would sit uh, on the plinth of the house, and
mm,
then they would just tell these horror stories. And I would just go downstairs and then listen to their story, whole like with complete attention, and then be not be able to sleep at all at night, and then go and complain to my mom that I can't sleep. And my mom would always
mm,
have to go and tell my neighbors to not tell them any of the scary stories that they tell me, because I would get spooked so easily. And
mm, mm,
I
mm,
still remember when I was still a student in Aachen, I was watching a ghost movie at a friend's place nearby, and at the end of the movie, I was so scared to go back to my room, and my room is just a building right beside his. So I asked
mm,
one of them to just come downstairs with me and watch me until I enter the building. And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
how do you like
Yeah, I know
about
those stories. I know those stories from Mandeep and other people.
how into ghost movies are you? Do they scare you at all?
No, the other definitely. I think during my youth, they
Or?
did,
Mm,
But nowadays, like if it's like I don't know, if it's like usual ghost movies, I'm
mm,
still okay with that, right? As long as they are just spooking you. I mean, like movies such as Insidious and stuff. I
mm,
actually like those movies a lot. I can watch those movies. But
mm,
then there are some movies like which are like really disturbing, right? Like the idea is itself disturbing.
mm,
The last one I think that I found quite disturbing was the movie called Hereditary. You know,
mm,
where slow by slow, like this family gets mad. It's almost
mm,
the same theme as this book, right?
mm,
But there is a cult, and the cult is actually influencing this family
mm,
and stuff. So that movie was quite disturbing. I found. I don't know.
mm,
Because in the end, there are some scenes which I don't know, which kept me thinking for weeks, right? Like especially the music, the background music, and everything, was like
mm,
really eerie, right?
mm,
So yeah, I think nowadays it's about. I don't like to watch gore movies, right?
mm,
Like Saw, I don't know. I was never a big fan of those movies, but yeah, like usually ghost movies where it's just about spooking and some
mm,
people die. It's okay. I can watch those stuff.
mm. You know,
Yeah.
I think when we discuss about this, something came to my mind. Is there's one thing I really liked about this book is
Mm,
normally in a movie something's happen and then people don't investigate from a scientific point of view, right?
mm,
Oftentimes, in a lot of ghost stories in the past, there is some kind of element of unknown into it.
mm,
Uh,
mm.
but for this book, I like how scientific it tries to get, right? It's trying to
Yeah.
rationalize everything that's happening there with objective premise, and all the
Yeah.
neighbors are very skeptical about the events that happen. And then
Yeah.
even with the meteorite, they are trying to reason what that might be, and there's a distinct way of thinking that is clearly expressed in the whole book, right? And
Mm, mm,
that's quite rare. And I have this theory,
mm,
which I think is quite funny,
mm,
is that a lot of the ghosts in our history can be explained by unexplained scientific method. And I always give this example of Kichkarni. Do you know what a
mm.
Kichkarni is?
Yeah, like in Nepal, right? Like the woman in white.
Yeah, the stories I heard was about a very beautiful woman, right?
Yeah.
And they're normally termed as Kichkarni, and the Kichkarni affects the main predominantly, right?
Mm, mm,
And oftentimes people will have irrational fears, but I always
mm,
thought about the things that were mentioned there, and I always found it quite funny. The thing is, so a typical symptom of somebody who has been haunted by a Kichkarni is that they are missing at night, right? They have
mm,
strange marks on their bodies,
mm,
right? Red marks.
mm,
And then the girl leads the guy into secluded forest.
mm, mm.
Now think about it. What does it look familiar? What does it sound familiar
Yeah,
to?
no, 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 no.
It
I
sounds
know what you're
familiar
implying.
to a young guy and a girl having an affair in a society that
Yeah.
is relatively close, right?
Mhm.
They are going
Mhm.
out in the night, right? They have
Yeah.
they have mark over their body for whatever reason.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Some of the additional symptoms are that they don't want to eat, or they're always lost in their thoughts. So
Mhm.
17-year-old guy finds the girl and then he's lost in the thought, right? They stay awake
Uh,
till late,
mhm.
naturally,
Uh, yeah.
and so on. So
So
I
how, but how do you explain the twisted foot in that context?
I think those are just additional things to make people scared. Otherwise,
Okay,
think about it.
okay.
Somebody would say a beautiful girl is going to come. She's going to
Mm,
take you from your room to a forest, and then
mm.
she's going to leave marks all over your body. I don't think there will
Okay,
be a lot
okay.
of guys who would be unwilling to say no to that. Would probably guys will
Uh,
look forward to that. So they have to create some kind of fear about it.
mm, mm,
But I have
mm,
always wondered, like, if somebody had marked, oh, this guy is haunted by Kichkanya, then there's probably the guy is it's the onus is on the guy to say that so that his illicit affair is not noticed by other people in the society, and it's probably was
mm,
is a ruse of hiding said affairs.
mm, mm, mm,
Yeah, and there are other stories as well. For example, we used to have a Nepali teacher who used to teach us about ghost stories, right? And he had
mm.
this explanation about a rakebut. Do you know what's a rakebut is?
Some fiery ghost, right? Like in
Exactly.
the mountain. Mm,
Exactly. So the story goes that the rakebut is a light that that is emitted by a dead body. So especially in a place where they burn the living, sorry, where they burn the dead, right? The dead people.
mm,
And my Nepali teacher, who for some weird reason was very well studied in chemistry, said that there
mm,
is considerable quantity of phosphorus in our bones, and
mm,
when you burn them, then the
mm,
phosphorus they get exposed to they I think they get purified and get exposed to the atmosphere. And
mm,
phosphorus by nature is effervescence. It means that it glows,
mm,
right? And he had like these kinds of explanation about ghost that people used to say, oh, this is a ghost, but couldn't necessarily explain it, and used to have
mm,
these
mm.
rational explanations for it. This was
Yeah.
very necessary because I studied my grade 4 to grade 6 in a school which was a boarding
Mm,
school. So it means all the students had to stay in the hostel.
mm,
And the school had a big compound and it had some forest areas, and there were a lot of ghost stories going around. And then it meant that every student would be there. There would be a group of students who would be easily spooked, like me myself, and that is what happened.
I know what you mean. I mean, the weirdest ghost stories was for me as a child was something like if you sleep like straight, not vertically, right,
Mm-hmm.
on your back,
Yeah.
then like the ghost comes from the wall, and cuts off your head, and then like puts it back in his like I don't know, like this bag,
Mm-hmm.
and then you die, something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I tried to actively avoid like sleeping on the sides, and not on my back because of that, right?
You want to challenge the ghost?
Uh, no, man, I didn't want it to get beheaded, I guess. And that I think like that habit is still there in me because I can't like until now I can't sleep like on my back. If I sleep, I am usually sleeping on my sides, right,
Mm-hmm.
and not on
Yeah.
my back as well.
Yeah. I mean, I have heard something like that, and there's apparently I don't know what that is called, but there's apparently some risk of lungs collapsing or something like that.
Mm, mm,
And people really do feel discomfort while sleeping on their back. Well,
yeah.
I had a friend who could sleep, and he was like a
Mm.
curious case for everyone, and nothing bad happened to him so far. But that's
Okay.
also a very common theme across multiple cultures, right?
Yeah. No, no,
Which
no.
which 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 would be your favorite ghost story? So story about the ghost, ghost fairy tale.
Hmm. There used to be a lot back in the days. Now I don't remember those to be honest, right? But yeah, as I was a child, like people were saying all sort of stuffs.
Hmm.
I don't know, man.
Are
I don't
there
think now
are there any
there is.
famous stories in Germany about ghosts? Because Their typical stories are like Hansel and Gretel. It's already quite
I
ominous,
mean,
but
I mean,
still.
there's one famous book for children. It's called like Hui Bu, right? Like it's a ghost from medieval times, right?
Uh-huh.
He used to spook in the castles and everything, But
Okay.
it's rather a comedy ghost story, right? It's not a horror ghost story. So it's
Mm,
actually really fun. You can
mm,
give it a read if you want.
okay. Yeah, maybe we can recommend it one of the weeks.
No, no, it's not. It's not that big of a book.
You for the first week of this year, I actually read a book called The Little Prince,
Hmm?
and the book is, I think, for somebody who's like 12 to 13 years old because it is so
Uh,
simple. The
uh,
message. Yeah, have you read that book?
no, no, I haven't.
Yeah, so
haven't.
it's quite simple, and yeah, that's how it is. So there's
Hmm,
not so deep stuffs to think about, not so much disagreements between us, which is normally the
hmm,
theme of this video. It's a really good book. We recommend to everyone as a good excuse for us to relive some of our childhood stories as well.
hmm.
And yeah, I really recommend this book. Do you have any final words about this book or no?
No, no, no. Maybe we can read like during this year one more book of Lovecraft.
Mm,
The famous one called the Call of Cthulhu. But
mm,
yeah, that's for some other time.
yeah, we can decide this in the coming weeks.
Hmm,
For the coming week, I want to recommend the book called The Four Agreements. This is by Don Miguel Ruiz.
hmm,
Truth be told, I come blind in this book. I just looked in Reddit for good book suggestions, and they
How
recommended
long is it?
this, right? It's basically about a practical guide to personal freedom or something like that.
Hmm.
It's a
How
self-help
long is it?
book, 120, 140 pages long.
Okay.
So, and yeah, and it has a really good review on Goodreads.
Hmm,
And as far as I know, I think this is about spirituality and personal development. So it's going to be a new, I would say, new kind of personal development that we're going to read about, right? Oftentimes, what we
hmm,
read about is basically about scientific progress in career and so on.
hmm,
For
hmm.
this week, I really wanted to read a spiritual book. My initial thought was Bhagavad Gita, but it is the English translations are like 400, 500 pages long,
Yeah. No.
and it's very difficult to find a Nepali version,
Hmm,
even in
hmm,
the
hmm,
internet
hmm,
or online. And we can't
hmm.
read Sanskrit. Can you read Sanskrit?
No, I
Yeah.
can't. But I have a book called A Practical Guide to Sanskrit in
Oh,
Aachen. So.
okay. Maybe we can
Hmm,
try that one. So yeah, for the coming week we'll be reading the Four Agreements, and yeah,
hmm,
there's great reading yet another week. And as we
hmm,
close to our half of the year, maybe we should do a special episode where we review all the books and maybe say which were the hit and which were the miss and which were the most impactful.
hmm, hmm.
And yeah, thank you very much, Anup, for keeping company and for actively suggesting great book like what you did for last week. That's a great
Thank you
suggestion.
for having me.
It makes up for the bad choice I made for the week before.
It's okay. Like it's always up and down, right? Like I mean, I recommended Heart of Darkness and others, the Mezzanine.
Oh yeah. Yeah, those weeks are quite quite funny as well.
So
Okay then, thank you very much.